Hi yogis, welcome back. So how are you going to put all the poses you know into a sequence that's appropriate for a wide range of students? It's a tough question. It's a lot to ask of a teacher, and I've created an 8-step path for sequencing Hatha Yoga. I find that having a format to follow, having this sequence of poses to follow, it gives me the chance to insert any poses from my repertoire into a sequence, and it allows me to cater my classes to whatever demographic has showed up on their mats at my class. So whether it's pregnant students, injured students, beginners, advanced students, young, old, whoever it is, by following this 8-step path, I can look around the room and insert whatever poses I know, whatever is in my repertoire, into this 8-step sequence. This is Land and Heart Yoga Teacher Training. My name is Kate. Thank you for joining me. This is our conversation about sequencing. So the 8-step path gives you the chance to teach students rather than teaching poses. The distinction is that everybody is unique, and by knowing what you're going to teach, by having a format to follow, you're able to look around the room and cater your instruction to the people who are currently in your classes. You never know who exactly is going to show up to your classes, so it's really handy to have a format to fall back on, and then you can adjust your instruction accordingly. So there's no need to over-explain poses to advanced students, and there's no need to leave beginner students completely in the dark about what they're supposed to be doing. You have the chance to notice and adjust your instruction according to who's in the room if you follow this 8-step template for Hatha Yoga. The steps are range of motion, sun salutations, standing poses for strength, arm balances for heat, seated poses to cultivate attention, back bends for possibilities, inversions to hone power, supine poses to settle in, and shavasana to take rest. So sun salutations to shavasana with a bunch of stops along the way. It sounds daunting, but it actually simplifies the process of creating your yoga classes. Your personal practice and what you teach are quite different, but this strategy of using an 8-step path is helpful for both your personal practice and for your teaching strategy. In your personal practice, it's really handy to fall back on a habit. In this case, the habit is an 8-step process in each sequence. So whether you're practicing for 10 minutes or for 60 minutes, you can follow this 8-step path. And habits are powerful tools that will help you hone your attention. They will help you arrive on your mat every single day. They'll help you get on with your yoga practice, even on the days that you don't want to. And then teaching using this 8-step path means there's one less decision that you have to make when you're creating your sequencing. It can be really overwhelming if you've taken on 2 or more classes a week, or many classes a week, or you have a really full schedule and you find you have to curate a class every day, and you want to be creative, you want to teach to the people in the room, you want to say something meaningful, you want to keep your students safe. You have all these requirements and this whole decision-making process in sequencing your classes. Starting from this format, these 8-step paths, means there's one less decision that you have to make. And the format, although the sequence is relatively rigid, the poses that you insert into the sequence are not. They can be any poses in your repertoire, any imagination of any shape of yoga poses that you've heard about or that you've seen or that you've practiced on your own. You insert what you know into this sequence, and with that strategy, you're able to create classes that are appropriate for any demographic, any physical ability, any student who shows up at your classes. This is our conversation about sequencing your yoga class. How are you going to put your classes together in an intuitive and helpful way for your students? So whatever poses you know and you know to be useful and you know how to describe, you can draw from that repertoire, and as such you can create sequences that are appropriate for any level of student. So whoever's in the room with you now when you're teaching, you can create a sequence for them. So from chair yoga to yoga for athletes to yoga for children, injured students, pregnant women, beginners, any demographic. You just draw from your repertoire of poses and you insert them into this 8-step path for sequencing Hatha Yoga. So grab your mat and your notebook. This sequencing strategy can be interpreted for any demographic, but we will do a sequence for Land and Heart Yoga Teacher trainees. So starting the sequence at the top of your mat, we start with a couple rounds of sun salutations. You don't have to overteach the sun salutations. They're just a chance for your students to link their breath with movement and to situate themselves on the mat. Take a breath in, reach up, inhale. Uttanasana, fold forward. Ardha Uttanasana, halfway lift and lengthen. Chaturanga Dandasana, step back. Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, inhale. Adho Mukha Svanasana, exhale. Take 3 breaths in down dog. The theory is that you're offering a relatively simple, organized process of movement through sun salutations so that your students can start to cultivate the moving meditation that's so central to a Hatha Yoga class. So you offer as few instruction as you can possibly get away with whatever demographic you're working with. And you guide them to find their own moving meditation through the ordered sequence of poses within a sun salutation. Look to the top of the mat, step forward, halfway lift and lengthen, exhale and fold, and stand all the way up. Inhale, reach up. So it can be any set or type of sun salutation. Hands come down to your heart center, whatever is appropriate for the students in your room. Inhale, reach up, Urdhva Hastasana. I'm choosing sun salutation A for this one. Fold forward, halfway lift and lengthen, Ardha Uttanasana, Chaturanga Dandasana, exhale back and down. Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, inhale, Adho Mukha Svanasana, exhale. Take 3 breaths here. Look forward, step to the top of the mat, Ardha Uttanasana, halfway lift. Uttanasana, fold forward, chin to chest. Urdhva Hastasana, inhale, stand up. Exhale, hands to heart center. One more round. Observe the power of silence, just teaching one cue per pose. Reach up. Fold forward. Look up and lengthen. Step back to low plank. Upward facing dog. Downward facing dog. Inverted V shape. 3 breaths. Look forward. Step to the top of the mat. Halfway lift, lengthen, fold. Stand up. Exhale. After the sun salutations, you come to standing poses. Step your hands to your waist. Step left foot back, warrior 2. Standing poses develop strong legs, mobility in your lower joints, confidence, and strength. The key word is strength with standing poses. Virabhadrasana B, warrior 2. In all your standing poses, encourage students to come to a slight edge of discomfort, a slight exertion, but no acute pain. Straighten into Trikonasana, triangle, right knee straightens, right hand to ankle, look up at your left hand. Always encourage your students to press down into both feet equally, and that applies whether they're standing on 2 feet or on 1 foot. We'll get to that in a moment. Ardha Chandrasana, balancing half moon, left hand behind your back, right hand to the mat. So here, both legs are strong and active even though only one is supporting the weight. Press down equally into both big toes. Look up at your hand. Ardha Chandrasana. Come back to warrior two. Land your left foot on the mat. Right knee is bent to 90 degrees. Rise up. Inhale. Straighten your legs, reach up and switch sides. Virabhadrasana B, other side. Continuing on with our standing section, the second part of the 8-step path. Both legs are strong and stable. Virabhadrasana B. Trikonasana, left hand down. You're finding this balance between ease and strength in each of the poses. Ardha Chandrasana, right hand behind your back, left hand on the mat. Find your balance. Virabhadrasana B, warrior two. Left knee is bent. Stand up. Find the balance between ease and strength. And you find that in your own practice. You practice these poses again and again, and then you can offer one or two cues depending on who's in the room, who you're teaching to. Virabhadrasana B, warrior two. Strongly weighted down into both feet. Hands to your waist, straighten your legs, step back to the top of the mat. Standing and balancing poses build strength. The next step is arm balances to start to build heat in your practice. So we'll flow down to an arm balance, reach your hands up, exhale and fold forward. Setting up for Bakasana, crow pose, turn your feet out to 45 degrees. Even beginner or injured students can practice taking weight onto their hands. They may never need to lift up. It's not a prerequisite that you come into the full expression of any pose. What is a prerequisite is that you engage whatever strength you need to start to build heat, to start to build the tapas in your practice. If you're coming into Bakasana, crow pose, your elbows come up towards your your knees come up towards your armpits and your toes touch behind you. Press into the mat, straighten your elbows. Building heat here. One more breath in, straighten, press the mat away from you. Come back to Malasana, yogi squat. So this is another pose that's available for anyone. There's modifications available. You can figure those out and add them to your repertoire. But the point is that pressing hands down and onto the mat can start to build heat. And students can take it as deeply or as shallowly as they need to. Rocking your weight back and forth, pressing into your hands, building heat. Arm balances for heat. After the arm balances, you come to seated poses. We will just sit down from here for Paschimottanasana, intense west stretch. Legs extend out in front of you. Seated poses are done after you've warmed up, after the range of motion, after the standing poses for strength, after the heat of the arm balances, and you've created this, you've prepared your body and mind to be still in seated poses. Paschimottanasana, intense west stretch. Fold forward, hook the outside edges of your feet. Look up and breathe in. Exhale and fold forward, honing your attention with seated poses. You're like a tired puppy, so you've exhausted yourself with the sun salutations, the standing poses, the heat of the arm balances, and your mind is prepared to sit still, to be here now, to focus on your practice. This is another spot in the practice where you cultivate the power of silence. You offer some instruction to your students, and then you allow them to be there in the pose silently, encouraging their own power of attention. We'll do one more seated pose. Come up halfway, breathe in. Come up all the way, breathe out. Baddha Konasana, soles of your feet together. bound angle pose. Press your elbows into your knees, tip forward slightly, take a deep breath in, and then sit quietly. The art of asana is being able to sit quietly with the muscles strong, the mind steady, and the heart open. After the seated poses, you start to add back bends. So lie down flat on your back. We'll do one on our backs, one on our bellies, and one other one. Setting up for Setu Bandha, seated, bound bridge pose. Lift your hips up. So back bends are relatively late in the practice because your students have a chance to warm up through the range of motion, the strength, the heat building of the arm balances, but more importantly, they've had a chance to hone the power of attention in the seated poses. Back bends are tricky, they're difficult, they're important, but it's really essential that attention is on the practice when you're doing them. Lift your hips a little bit higher. So by inserting them quite late in the practice, students have a chance to engage their core strength, warm up their joints, and maybe engage their bandhas, their locks, those energetic locks that create buoyancy in all the poses of yoga. Lower down and onto your back. Just flip over and onto your belly. Set up for Bhujangasana, Cobra pose. Cobra pose is a useful back bend because it is challenging, it's sufficiently challenging for advanced students, and it's sufficiently simple for beginner students. Cobra pose, remind everybody to keep their legs strong and engaged. Take 3 deep breaths in your Cobra pose. A very accessible back bend. And finally, sit yourself up into Hero's pose. One more back bend. Back bends, the key word with back bends is possibilities. Heart opening possibilities. Students have established, come up onto your knees, students have established that mind-body connection earlier in the practice, and they are physically prepared for back bends and possibly emotionally prepared for the emotional feeling, release that can come up from these heart openers. So Ustrasana, hands are on your low back, engage the strength of your legs, and lean back into your back bend. Ustrasana, camel pose. Sit yourself up, sit down onto your heels. Those are just a couple options of back bends. The key word with back bends is possibilities. Next is inversions. The key word with inversions is power. They are very strong poses, headstand, handstand, or more restorative versions such as legs up the wall. Do your own practice, whatever feels good in your own practice, but be really careful to evaluate who's in the room before teaching certain poses. Headstand in particular is a really beneficial practice, a really beneficial pose to any yoga practice, but it's important to evaluate the risk-reward ratio in this pose. Some inversions, such as headstand, are seductive. They're powerful poses. Some students will fling themselves into headstand earlier than they have the strength to do it. Your strategy to mitigate this when you're in the inversion part of your sequencing is to always instruct headstand as a process and not a goal. So it's a step-by-step process of getting there. It doesn't matter how deeply you come into headstand or if you lift up every time. It's just this fundamental process. It's a sequence, just like the overall structure of a Hatha Yoga class. Head resting on the mat in the little basket for your hands. Elbows no wider than shoulder width apart. Engage your core strength. Always instruct headstand as a process. It embodies the entire practice of yoga. It is a practice of patience and diligent application of effort. Do it in your own practice if you want to, but evaluate who's in your room before you are instructing it. The alternative in the inversion section is a more restorative version, supported legs propped up. Viparita Karani translates to active reversal. So the intention with inversions is to get upside down and stay there for a spell. So a supported inversion, students can just slide their thumbs underneath their hips for a little bit of support for their low back. And then this is still a very engaging inversion. It encourages core strength and stability. But for anybody who is new to the practice or doesn't have a strong headstand practice, this is a pose that encourages you or allows you to stay upside down for a little while, a couple minutes, rather than struggling to even get into the pose. So Viparita Karani translates to active reversal, and this is an alternative in your sequencing for headstand or even in addition to headstand. And you'll stay for a little while upside down. And then finally, the second last part of the sequence, supine poses. Start with reclined pigeon, Supta Kapotasana, also called figure four legs. Supine poses give students a chance to settle, come back to awareness of their breath, let go of any ego that they felt from achieving a pose or disappointment from not achieving a pose. These are the final resting, quiet poses. The key word is settle, the final poses before you settle into Shavasana. Other side. And then final rest and renewal is in Shavasana. All of the information from the practice is absorbed by your body and your mind. Always include Shavasana in your 8-step path. And you don't need to say very much, if anything, during Shavasana. Students have heard a lot. You've offered lots of instruction in the rest of the class. This is an opportunity where silence will truly guide the way. Silence is on your side for Shavasana. You are a sentry at the front of the room, holding guard, holding space, while your students settle down and into Shavasana. Then finally, you gently coax your students out of their reverie. Shavasana goes with the transition off the mat. And use whatever language and cues have resonated with you in the past, guiding your students to come up to sit. You've guided your students through this 8-step path of Hatha Yoga. Bring them up to sit. And then it can be very powerful to have a ritual that you end with. These aren't platitudes, what I'm about to suggest. They're just powerful reminders of the broad power of the practice. Something like, infuse your mind with the qualities of the heart, love, joy, and compassion. That's something that one of my teachers used to say. She said it at the end of every single class, and it always reminded me to do just that. Infuse my mind with the qualities of the heart. The power of the practice is love, compassion, and joy. Namaste means to bow together as equals. Another really powerful mantra to close the class with is to remind students to bow to the teacher within. So using these phrases or these powerful reminders of the broad reach of the practice, it's a nod to the ritual of the yoga class. As I said, this 8-step path creates a habit, it creates a ritual for you to follow, to subscribe to once you get onto your mat. And using the same phrase to end your class every time, it's a nod to the ritual of the entire practice of yoga. And students will appreciate it. These are not platitudes, but rather powerful reminders of the broad reach, the eternal relevance of yoga. Namaste, yogis. Infuse your mind with the qualities of the heart. Love, compassion, and joy. Thumbs to your forehead for clarity of thought. Thumbs to your lips for clarity of speech. Thumbs to your heart for clarity of intention. Bow to the teacher within. And good luck out there. Thank you, yogis. Until we meet again. Namaste.